welcome everyone. Today we want to welcome Courtney Townley. She is a mover, a shaker, and a healthy people maker. She is the founder of Grace and Grit, where she helps women reclaim their health and happiness. Courtney has spent time as a dancer, a movement teacher, gym owner, health coach, self-development junkie, and motivational speaker. She graduated from the University of Michigan and is fully certified Pilates instructor, national strength and conditioning personal trainer, ACE health coach, precision nutrition level 2 coach, and has hosted 248 episodes of her podcast, Grace and Grit. She is also a very proud student of the Ito Portal method. Her YouTube video that highlights her training under Ito has over 355,000 views. She is most recently a graduate of one of the most respected life coaching programs in the world, the Life Coach School. Courtney lives in Missoula, Montana with her husband, son, and massive Great Dane, Sully. Courtney, we want to welcome you to the ASA podcast.
Hi, Courtney.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And let's just be clear, it's a blind 200-pound Great Dane.
Yeah.
He's a rock star. He inspires me every day.
Yeah, I guess let's lead off with that. I guess it's just a sort of an interesting start. I didn't plan on that, but yeah. You're a Great Dane, huge dog, amazing dog. And I've been following this story. So what went on there with Sully?
Yeah, we wrestled around Christmas time. He was getting glaucoma. He wasn't even 2. And, glaucoma is where the fluid builds in the eye, and it gets to a point where it can detach the retina and cause permanent blindness. Mm-hmm. So we worked with 4 different vets, and we could not figure this out. And long story short, he ended up going blind on Christmas Day. And then we worked with an ophthalmologist in Spokane who just said, hey, the pressure's still there. So the kindest thing to do at this point is to remove his eyes. And I was devastated. I mean, just devastated. And it was such a good lesson for me because I do so much thought management work with my own clients because the stories we tell ourselves get in the way of everything. And I had a lot of stories about having a 200-pound dog with no eyes, right? And I just thought his life was over. And, he comes, we pick him up at the surgery center at 5:00 and he comes out wagging his tail and jumps in the truck. And that has literally been how he has healed ever since. Nothing slows him down. He's not afraid of anything. It did not affect his life.
Yeah. I followed that whole story and because I'm a huge animal lover and I love dogs. And when I saw all of that in your updates and him coming out of surgery and then fetching and playing and following your son, I was really taken back at that and just the whole resiliency. And I don't know, that is just a really cool story. I would have thought that his life was over, right? A blind dog that's 200 pounds. What do you do with that?
I know. Well, and my ophthalmologist really became my counselor for 2 weeks because I was just, it was 2 weeks leading up to the surgery. And he was explaining to me that the prefrontal cortex in a dog isn't really the same as in a human. Mm-hmm. And, the prefrontal cortex is how we think about our thinking. So that's where we make up all our stories and all our belief systems. And animals don't do that. They just adapt. And I was like, can we remove mine? That sounds awesome.
When you're telling the story, I was going to say there's probably a lesson that people can learn from animals. Yeah. Because, if I was to go through a surgery or something, maybe where I lost a part of my body or my eyes or something, I could imagine being very depressed and, just depressed and down on myself, and moping about it for months or even years following. But a dog is just into the new situation. This is what life is now. And they're just living in the present moment.
100%. There was no depression in that dog. I mean, if anything, he just felt 1,000 times better because the pressure was so intense. And there's moments where I wish that dog was afraid because he just goes full out to everything. And, 200-pound freight train is hard to slow down, but he is living life large.
He's not spending the next 6 months moping about what he's lost. He's just living life.
He just moved on. He just accepted what happened and just figured it out with his other senses.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a cool takeaway to start the show with. Right? So everyone listening, take some notes there. That's important. That's huge. Wow.
It is. It's so big. And the brain it does a lot of funny things, and it convinces us of a lot of things that aren't true. And, for years I was, as you explained in my bio, like a coach, a trainer, like I have been in the wellness space my entire career. And for years, I was always focused on just the action. Like it's just about taking action. Well, what precedes action? Emotion and thoughts. So if we're not providing people with the skill sets to manage those things, consistent action is it's not going to be a thing. So that's really kind of how I shifted in my own career is, just that, yes, I still help people to work on strategy and implementation, but the real work, the meat and potatoes is in the thoughts and the emotions.
Yeah. And I love that. I was going to ask you, like, how did the lead up to founding Grace and Grit happen? Like, I know that you were a coach, a trainer, you have, an extensive, great background, but what clicked? Because what you just said, I agree with 100%. It's not just about action and mindlessly moving forward, right? There's so much framework and limiting beliefs and things we have to work through mentally. Like what inspired you to create Grace and Grit?
Well, it's interesting. I'm sure you can relate to this. Like once you enter the wellness space, it's kind of like an onion. Like the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know. I mean, I think education is like that in general. And, I was always a really passionate mover. As you said, I was a dancer. So I figured, well, I could just teach people movement as a way to make money because I like doing that. And that was lovely, except I very quickly started to realize that people were coming in to feel better, not just to become better movers. And they didn't necessarily have the passion for movement that I had. They just literally wanted to get out of pain. And so I also simultaneously realized that while it was great, they were coming in to work with me a few days a week, what they were doing outside of the time with me was kind of everything. And I didn't really have any control over that. I didn't have any education around that. So I went on, like you said, with precision nutrition and other things to just really understand how sleep and nutrition and the way we think and all the things affect our physiology. And then armed with that, this was probably in my 30s. I'm in my mid 40s now. So in my early 30s, I started working with a health coach because I was the fit looking trainer who was pretty much a train wreck, right? I just hurt. My joints hurt. My digestion sucked. I needed like 2-hour naps every afternoon. There were a lot of signs that things were not going well in my physiology. And I was working with all these clients they weren't just losing weight. They were like, their eyes were shining and they were happy and their hair was healthy. Like there were all these indications that whatever they were doing, it was clearly improving their health. Well, lo and behold, they were all working with the same health coach. So now this is before health coaching was even a thing. Like health coaching was not a label. So I hired her. And after a year, she was like, you really should be teaching this work. Like if you really give a rip about people's health, movement alone is not enough. Like you got to address the other stuff. So she was kind of my invitation into that space. And I hang my head in shame a little bit, but I will tell you for a good 8 years of my career, I was very rooted in fat loss because come on, it's hugely marketable. People are hungry for it. It is something that people need help with. I was really successful with it, but it was also very focused on actions. I'm going to create a list of rules and regulations, a protocol that you're going to follow, and you will elicit a certain response. Awesome. And it did until it didn't. Right? Until people started realizing that there is no self-direction here. I'm not calling the shots. I don't know what to do when I don't have this other person dictating to me what to do. And so it was a really tough moment for me because I was like, damn it. I've been in this field now for, 15, 20 years, and I'm just starting to understand the importance of self-leadership and how important it is to empower our clients to be self-directed and not just following us all the time. So that was a very long-winded explanation. Did I answer your question?
No, that is an absolutely phenomenal response. And me and Andy are both so agreeing with everything you're saying. That is, it's the market and the masses generally easily buy into the quick fix, right? The lose 5 pounds and take these 3 steps to happiness. What you're selling, and a lot of what we sell and try to sell, is more of the self-awareness, the ability to coach yourself and to think for yourself and all of that. But that takes a very special mindset.
I know.
And to go farther, it takes a very special marketing creativity plan on how to find the people that are ready for that step, right?
Yeah.
And they're two very big messages that are very different in how they come across. Did you find that yourself?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I still, I do consults if people want to work with me privately, I do consults to see if we're a good fit. And it's really for me more than it is for them, because I really want to vet that the people who are working with me are in the right headspace for this kind of change. And I fully understand that not everybody is there. I don't at all mean this to sound, kind of demeaning or derogatory, but the way I usually explain it is that there's a maturity spectrum to health. And we all come in from different places, just like movement, right? People come in through karate and people come in through dance and Olympic lifting. But once you're in the arena, it's like your eyes start to open, if you're looking to be opened, that there's all these other possibilities. And I think the same is true with health, that unfortunately we are very conditioned to believe there's like this one cookie cutter path that we must follow to create a response. And when people, even if they enter that space, if they're looking and if they get frustrated enough, they will eventually see that there's so much more possibility. And they just maybe haven't met the right people or the right communities that will help to foster that. And I see, it's encouraging that I do see this conversation happening more. We are encouraging community. We are encouraging people to think more expansively about health. It's just still slow, and it's just not as loud as I'd like it to be.
I know.
Well, that's the hardest work too. The mindset shift is the hardest part. So it's going to be a slow process to get people to focus on that, and then to get them to make the changes that they need to make. It's hard, deep psychological work, right?
Yeah,
it is. And it's not overnight. Like, it's not something you're going to start practicing and immediately feel the benefit.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you might feel better, within a few weeks, but it's kind of like there has to be this like bone of faith involved, where it's like you're going because you trust that this just makes a whole lot of sense to you, and you're willing to try it on long enough to really make an educated decision if this is the right direction for you. And honestly, when I work with people on that direction, I never have people turn back. They're like, once you're in it, once you see it, you can't turn it off.
So true. And we say that all the time. Like, once you're addicted to feeling good, you don't go back. And it's sort of, it's something that unless people can experience that for a period of time, they can't understand that, right? And so they have to get a long enough feeling of what that is to feel their best, like proper sleep, food, positive social network, movement. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this is great. I want this routine day in and day out.
Yeah. It is. It's that positive reinforcement of like, oh, there's all these perks. It's not just, I still have a lot of women who, they'll have days where they're like, oh, I'm just so frustrated. And when I really dig, like, why are you frustrated? You always know the reason, because the scale's not moving. It's always the scale. Right. And I'm like, okay, let's expand our parameters of progress. Let's just try that. And so you start asking them, like, what other ways are you noticing benefits? Well, I'm sleeping better, and I'm not as reactive with my husband, and I'm like going after some things that I really didn't have the confidence to go after just a few months ago. And I'm like, okay, but you're not making progress, because this one number is telling you that this is the definitive or the definition of progress. It's mind blowing.
That's a really cool term you put on that, parameters of benefit. Right? Is that what you said?
Parameters of progress, like
parameters of progress. Yes.
Yes.
That is, I hope everyone writes that down that's listening. Like there is something to be said there, that whether you're a weightlifter and the weights aren't going up, or you are, looking to lose weight and the scale's not changing, what other benefit are you getting from your new practice?
Right.
And there's so many.
So many. But if you're only looking for evidence for why you're failing, you're going to find it. because you're going to narrow that lens to just this one thing that we all know that progress in any area is never linear. And that is so true of the scale, but so I always say that progress, if you really want to see your progress, you need to have a wide lens.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. Now, what kind of questions, I didn't have this on my sheet here to ask you, but like I do a consultation also for an intake for us. We have for 11 years and I won't deviate from that. What kind of questions do you ask on your end? Like maybe one or two that may be different from say just a personal trainer. Like how are you vetting these people to work with you?
Yeah. So two of the questions that come to mind, it's like first of all, it's 18 questions that they have to go through. Because if you're not even willing to take the time to sit down and fill those out, you shouldn't work with me.
Sure.
But two of the questions that come to mind are, well, first of all, of course, what's your goal? Like, what is the thing that you're aspiring to, that you're struggling with? And why haven't you gotten there yet? And then the follow-up questions to that I love so much are, what are the obstacles outside of you? So this really gets to show me kind of the thinking of the client. Like if they say, well, my husband's not supportive, right? Or I just, I don't have any time, or I'm too busy. Like these are all things that naturally come up. But then the second question is, what obstacles inside of you are preventing you from making progress? And that's really the golden question, because that is the driver of all of the outside stuff.
Yeah, that's a deep question.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I get like a one-word answer, or, sometimes I get like people really thinking it through, and they realize that they don't have a strong sense of self-worth, that they don't really believe it's possible, that they're constantly being a jerk to themselves. They're not forgiving themselves. And all of that is standing as a barrier.
So I wanted to ask, it seems like, you've got the personal training and the health coaching background, you know how to do all that stuff with people, but it sounds like with your new company, Grace and Grit, a lot of the work you do with clients is sometimes more psychological than physical. And maybe the most important work is the psychological stuff. You focus a lot on habit change and changing mindset and limiting beliefs, all that kind of stuff. So do you have a specific process that you go through with every client? Are there a series of steps that you work on, or is it completely different with everybody? You do have a system.
I do. And so, the thing that I kind of introduced to everybody initially is that health is so much bigger than physical health. So I was in the physical health arena for many, many years. And of course, I believe it's important. Like it's not, and it is something that I work with my clients on improving. But there's all these other dimensions to health that directly influence our physical health. So we have mental health, we have emotional health, we have environmental health, I said relationship health, we have our spiritual health, right? And so I don't really know where a woman is truly rumbling until she comes to work with me, because you know what she'll make it about is it's always about her weight, or she just wants more energy. But when we really look at the disconnect in the wholeness of her health, she might she's in a job she's hated for 30 years, or she's been married to a man that she's completely disconnected from, or she just doesn't even know what she wants to do with the rest of her life. And all of that is directly influencing her physical health.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I think it's really beneficial that I have the knowledge that I do as a trainer, as a nutrition coach, because we definitely talk a lot about, there's 4 layers. I'll tell you this because this will simplify it. There's 4 layers to the work that I teach every client. The first layer is chemical balance. If you are chemically jacked because your lifestyle is so off the wall, you will never really be able to manage your thoughts and emotions.
Okay.
Right?
Can you give examples of that, Courtney, for people listening?
100%. Yeah. So the areas that I focus on for chemical balance, of course, nutrition, right? The fuel that you're giving your body, sleep, your movement profile. So how much you're moving in a day, what you're doing for exercise, those kinds of things. Hydration, I would put with nutrition, but hydration is one of them. Mindset, and then community. So it's those 5 areas that I really kind of work with a client to at least make sure that they're paying attention to those things, and they have some kind of plan for making sure that those nutritional elements are embedded into their life. So once we kind of help them stabilize chemistry, and again, I'm not saying like we're going to make PRs in the gym or they're going to have lost 100 pounds. We're talking about basic stability. Then the other areas that I focus on, of course, is strategy, because a lot of people are using these insane strategies where, of course, they're all in for a few weeks and then they throw in the towel, never to go back.
Yep.
And it's like, there's nothing wrong with you, but your strategy sucks. So let's talk about smart strategy. So of course I help them with time management and organization and planning and all those things.
Oh, wow.
And then the final two main areas that I work a lot on are, of course, the thought management, managing your brain, parenting your brain, as I like to say, and then emotional agility. We are humans and we are meant to feel all the emotions, not just the nice ones. And the sooner we can start to allow ourselves to feel difficult emotion, the sooner we will stop buffering with things like alcohol and food.
Oh, yeah.
Difficult emotions are telling you something, right? They're telling you that
They're
something's
messengers,
off.
100%. Yes.
Yep.
So it kind of all fits together, even though it seems like, yeah, we could just talk about mindset. But I think that's one of the, for me, it's one of the missing conversations in the wellness industry. I don't want to just talk about gut health. I don't want to just talk about managing my mental stress, because we know that there is a highway between the brain and the gut that runs both ways. So if you're not addressing all of these facets, I feel like we're leaving a lot to be desired in terms of, hyper focusing on one area. And the thing is, I don't think it's that we can't focus on one area exclusively, but at some point we have to consider how that fits into the wholeness of our life.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I ask also?
Yeah.
You've chosen to work with women exclusively.
Yeah.
I believe, right? Yep. And I'm wondering what the thought process was there, as in like, what challenges did you see that women face that men don't? That made you think that there was a real need to address women specifically.
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting question, because I feel like I didn't choose women as much as they chose me. It just happened to be the bulk of my clients. And at some point I just decided these are the people I'm serving the majority of the time. So why not go all in with that? Because I've worked with them for so long. I understand kind of the intricacies of being a woman, especially midlife. So midlife is, for a woman, is a really interesting time. I call it the renovation years. We have spent a lifetime building up a life. And I'm not saying that men haven't. This is just speaking to the women that I work with. We have spent all this time building up this life, taking on responsibilities. And then we start experiencing like these hormonal fluctuations, which to me are really powerful messengers, not just about our lifestyle choices, but about how we've constructed our life. So it's an amazing opportunity for women to start looking around and saying, I'm really proud of certain things and I really want to keep them. And there's other things I want to renovate. Maybe it's my job. Maybe it's my relationship. Maybe it's my physical body, right? But the renovation is what I get so excited about, because it's such an opportunity for growth and personal development.
I love that word, renovation. I like that, because I think of like renovating a house. You take it from not so nice to like really nice, and you're doing that with yourself,
100%.
And just hearing you say that, you're giving the client permission to reinvent themselves. And I think giving permission, because they're not giving it to themselves, right? Because they've come to you for help. But just hearing someone say that, like, now is the time to make these changes that we've, discovered. That in and of itself is huge. Like, it's okay to be where you are, and it's okay to be excited or scared about where you want to go, but getting permission from someone, a mentor or community member or whatnot, is a lot of times that's the missing step for people to make a big change, because they never got permission to do that.
Yeah. And my objective, of course, is to get the client to give themselves they have to, right? At some point, they have to step into that. But I always tell them, in the meantime, you can borrow my belief in you, because you're not quite there yet. So you can just borrow mine in the meantime, but really the number one reason that most people don't make the changes that they want to make in their life is because something they're afraid of feeling. They're afraid of feeling failure. They're afraid of feeling uncomfortable. They're afraid of feeling disappointment. And so this is why, like, teaching my students to kind of embrace all the emotions is such an important thing, because it helps you stay the course. If you're willing to feel any emotion, how would that change your life?
Do you find that when they're starting to embrace these emotions, that is a lot of it fear and limiting beliefs? Like, what are you seeing on your end? Is that it?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, first of all, they're referencing their past failures.
Okay.
I've never done this before, or I tried it before, it didn't work.
Yep.
So they're literally looking for evidence why they can't succeed this time. And really all that does is it gets them to fail in advance. Like, so not helpful.
Yeah.
So I always tell, especially women, by the way, because, and this again, I don't know if it's true for men, but what I do know is true for a lot of women is they're trying to return to a version of themselves that they used to be. And I'm like, whoa, stop that. Because number one, you can't.
Yep.
And number two, you're also completely blocking all this possibility for what you could step into.
Yes. Yes. Do you
So,
think
this
that,
ties into, I'm sorry, were you
That's
going to say
okay.
more? Well,
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I'm wondering like how much you focus on identity with people, you know, because we all have like a set of beliefs that we identify with and stories that we tell ourselves.
Of course.
You know, for example, one might say that, you know, I'm not good at math, and then they believe that about themselves, so they never engage with math. And it could be, you could learn it pretty quickly if you just allowed yourself to try. So a lot of times these beliefs that we identify with end up becoming self-fulfilling prophecies in a way. And I'm wondering, do you do a lot of helping people change their identity? Is there like a process to that?
Well, behavior change, I think behavior change is identity change. Like, it literally is changing the way you think about yourself. And all a belief is a recycled thought.
Yes.
It is a thought you have thought so many times, you believe it to be true.
Yeah.
So if we want to change what's possible for our life, one of the very first things we have to do is start changing the way we think about what's possible for our life.
so true. Yeah.
And that is just like, I mean, I see women's heads spin when I say that, like, what, like, that's not, because they think that thoughts are happening to them.
Yep.
I don't have agency over my thought process. And once you teach them actually how to choose thoughts and how to have power over that, they're just like, what? Where has this been my whole life?
Well, and Dr. John DeMartini has always said, like, you are your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So, and I have found in talking with many clients and family members and this and that, that the majority of the words and sort of the what they're the point they're getting after in conversations is a negative tone. And they don't mean it. They don't know what's going on, but I'm very hyper. What's that? You see that, Andy?
It's automatic.
It's automatic.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very hyper aware of that because I'm a sensitive guy, and I'm very aware of my environment and the energy that I'm absorbing. And I see it in the overwhelming majority of people that they have a negative self-talk that then gets portrayed on to the people around them. And so, for example, if I say, I'm interested in buying a 10-unit rental home, and you say that to a family member or a friend, and they say, well, gosh, tenants suck. Why would you want to do that? Right? Automatic. Like, if I didn't have a belief system in myself, I would sort of take advice from that, right? And sort of create fear within me and limiting beliefs, or, oh, so-and-so said that. But I really feel, and I don't know what has caused this over time, but very few people have an optimism within them that is pushing for the better of people around them, and also radiating an energy that truly wants others to vibrate higher. They're almost, I call them like the Karens or like the Debbie Downers. Like,
or the Eeyores. I always call them Eeyore.
Eeyore, yeah, exactly. And I don't mean like,
I'm okay.
yes. And I don't mean like you need to be this crazy optimist. It's everything's going to succeed and life is perfect, right? Like, because I don't believe in any of that, but I do believe that you have a choice to radiate a positive energy frequency and be proactive in your thoughts and responses and harness that, or you don't. And then it's amazing how much people are soaking in the negative. And I think that
Yeah.
is exactly why people are afraid and they're fearful to move on to that next big thing. For sure. I can resonate with that tremendously. And I think
Yeah.
social media has
Oh,
a
of course.
huge part of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you have someone that is fearful of taking this new idea or this big step in their life and they post it and
Uh-huh.
it doesn't go as well as they thought, or it goes bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, now you've got 1,000 friends that don't like this and it's horrible and I shouldn't have tried it and I'm going to delete the post because I don't have enough likes. I hear that all the time. They just delete it.
Yeah.
That's a tough place.
But it's a tough place because they have a stream of thoughts,
Yep.
and then they have a lot of emotion because of those thoughts that don't feel good.
Mhm.
That's all it is. That's all they're afraid of. So I always say to my clients, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like, let's go to worst case scenario.
Mhm.
And they'll say, well, I might lose my job. And if I lose my job, I can't pay my bills. Okay, well, what would be scary about not paying my bills? Well, I might live on the street. Okay. And we keep going down this really dark road.
Mhm.
And ultimately, what they pinpoint every single time is a lot of emotion. That's what they're terrified of. They're terrified of feeling like a failure. They're terrified of not living up to the expectations. And so, and a lot of that is self-induced because of what they're choosing to focus on, and who you hang out with,
Yeah.
and what you fill your social media feed up with is all a choice.
Yes.
I saw a TED Talk years ago. I wish I remember who it was, but it was so brilliant. He said, I don't know what it is about human nature, but the negative seems to stick to us like Velcro, and the positive seems to slide off us like Teflon.
Totally.
And I was like, oh, it's so true.
Mhm.
So the very reason this happens, I think, is because people are unwilling to do the very thing that we all teach, which is practice. We teach people how to practice day in and day out. And if you want to wake up excited about your life, you have to practice thinking and living in a way that causes that.
Mhm.
It's a byproduct of your thinking and your emotions and your actions.
Yep.
But people don't want to practice. They want the magic pill. They want the like one word of wisdom. They want to just like, you know, teleport to the future where all their problems have been resolved.
And, you know, that word practice with being optimistic and proactive and excited with getting out of bed, like, you know, there's such a self-care component to that takes a lot of time, reading, writing, movement, food, social interaction. I joke that I spend a ton of time on myself, so that way I'm ready to go, right, for other people, right? And I think that is almost viewed as like greedy or selfish, or, you know, I think the public can perceive it that way, like, oh, I'm taking 3 hours a day for myself when all these other people need me. I would argue that the people that you're helping so much with all this free time that you think you have, you're not really truly helping them at the level that you could be if you were optimizing yourself fully and then giving that.
Yeah. It's definitely an exercise in trimming the fat in your life, right? Things that you're kind of spending time on that really aren't like your top priorities, right? So when I ask a client, like, what are your top priorities, and limit it to 3, it's usually like the same 3 things. It's usually health, it's usually their relationships, and it's usually their job.
Yep.
And then I ask them to prioritize those priorities, put them in order from most important to least important. And you know what is never first is their job.
Yep.
But you know what always goes on their calendar first is their job.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's like this lack of integrity a little bit, right? With how they're living versus what they truly believe in terms of their value system.
Totally.
And, you know, it's the other thing I say to people all the time, I just call it out for what it is, because I hear I don't have time every day, 100 times a day.
So do we.
And kind of my standard response is, let's call it what it is. It's not that you don't have time, because we all have time. We all have 24 hours a day. But what's a truer statement is that you have not made this a priority yet.
Yep.
And yet is a beautiful word because it's an invitation. When you're ready, it is here. You're just not ready yet.
Yeah, yet is a growth mindset word.
Yeah, yet.
Go ahead, Andy.
You're talking about all the changes that people need to make and stuff, but it's really hard to make changes in areas where we don't. It's hard to change things that we don't know that we need to change.
Yeah.
So I think one of the first steps, and I've heard you say this, is self-awareness kind of comes first above all else, so that
course.
you know what you need to change. Can you talk a little bit about what self-awareness is and why it's so important, and like maybe a little bit about the process to develop self-awareness?
So I always joke, it's not even a joke, it's true that self-awareness is not a feel-good exercise, which I think is why a lot of people avoid it like the plague.
Yeah, I agree.
You get to see all the places and spaces that you're falling short and that you're not showing up, and you get to take this radical accountability for who you're being in the world. That is not fun. And I can see why a lot of people avoid it, but we cannot change what we don't see. And, you know, I always say that health it's not a destination, it's a relationship. It is the relationship that you have with yourself. And you cannot have a good relationship with yourself unless you spend time with yourself. You got to get to know yourself. And self-awareness is how we do that. So I think self-awareness honestly looks very different for everybody. I think it's a very personalized practice. And I also think it's a variable practice. Like what I do to be self-aware is not always the same. You know, sometimes like I go through periods where I'm really on top of like my morning routine, and that keeps me super self-aware and intentional about my day. But there's other periods of my year where self-awareness really has to look like self-reflection at the end of the day or somewhere in the middle of the day. That might be meditation, it might be journaling, it could be so many things. But the number one thing that I would say self-awareness is acknowledging how you are showing up exactly. Because a lot of people have these really radical stories. Like I have women all the time come to me that say, I'm doing everything right and nothing's changing. And in almost 20 years of coaching, I have never found that to be true. Right? Like they just have the story that they're doing everything right. But once I have them put pen to page and start being accountable to what they're truly doing, I don't even have to coach them. They're like, oh, I see where some of the gaps are. And it's all like they have this big epiphany moment that, oh, now I can take accountability because I see it. So sometimes just tracking behavior, how you're really showing up, can be a powerful, powerful tool.
That's an interesting thing that you said there, that once they develop self-awareness, it's almost like you don't have to coach them. And that's kind of what self-awareness gives you, is I guess the ability to finally be in control of your own life. You see what you need to work on, and you see why and what you need to do to change things. So you're kind of empowering people to like eventually not need you as a coach and actually be able to kind of coach themselves through life into a happier, healthier place.
Yes. And that I think for every teacher out there should be our objective, is to set these people free.
I agree.
Get to a point where they just don't need us. But even the other thing is, I think it's really important for clients to hear that just because you see all the dirt under the rug, it doesn't mean you got to clean it up. That's a choice. You do not have to. You can put that rug back down and walk away as if you never saw it. Right? If you want to live your life with that, I call it integrity pain, by the way. Integrity pain is when you're not really aligning your actions with what you know to be true about your life. And integrity pain is a very real thing for a lot of people, right? They just like, for example, I work with a lot of athletic women who they don't have weight to lose. They look healthy. But when I coach them, it quickly becomes apparent how unhealthy they are. They're not sleeping at night. They haven't pooped in a week. You know, there's all kinds of things that are indicating that their chemistry is off. And there's a lot of women walking around in the world like that who, because they're the same weight they weighed in high school, they're convincing themselves that they're healthy. And it's like, but they, on a deep level, I think they know they're not, because there's all these other pebbles being thrown at the window that are indicating that their health is off. But they're just choosing to ignore the dirt under the rug. And that is a choice. You can live that way. Lots of people do.
And the exercise that you said, putting pen to paper and sort of tracking, no matter what it is, it could be food, it could be sleep, it could be where you spend your time in a day, who you talk to. That is huge. There was a business coach a few years ago that started off one of his seminars with that I was following, with tracking where you spend your time and what you're doing throughout the entire day. He said that it will blow your mind how much time you waste.
It's crazy.
And I've never forgotten that. And I'm still guilty for sure, at some level, for sure. But it's something that's always on my mind with, how much time we are truly wasting. And that's only defined by the person, right? Like it could not be wasting to someone else with the same activity, right? But if you have this stated goal and these stated values, your actions have to support the goals and the values. And you can only figure that out through tracking and self-awareness. So if you say that being an athlete is your top goal and you're 22 and you're killing it, but we go through all of your values and where you spend your time, money, energy, thoughts, and it's like 8th on the list.
Yeah.
Your goals shouldn't be all athlete based, because your actions are proving that it's not a top value for you. And like you had said, that people will say that it's relationships and health and their job, are their top priorities, but then they're spending most of their time and effort on their job when they're not admitting that's really truly their number one value, and they don't need to even state that. Their actions are showing that.
100%. Yeah.
Those awarenesses are home runs for people.
Yeah.
And, over the years, we've given quite a few people permission to not state that weight loss is their top goal, because your actions are proving that it's not.
Yeah.
And so then we say something like, could you just imagine how much less stress you would have in your life and how much happier you would be if you just didn't care if you lost weight? And that's how I say it. You just generally don't care if you lose any weight. And a lot of them, like half of them, I would say laugh. And they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. Maybe I really don't care if I lose 10 pounds. Maybe that doesn't really define my happiness level. And then they release that as their goal and they realign something else to do with their actions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge, Courtney. Yeah.
I love the way you said that, just inviting them to just consider that maybe this isn't a priority of yours, because your actions are clearly demonstrating that it's not. And I think people do need to hear that. I remember my wedding day of all days. It was a great day. I was super excited, but I was also emotional. I think a lot of people are on their wedding day. I wasn't like, bridezilla by any stretch. I was just emotional, but I will never forget my grandfather's new wife was our minister, and she came and found me, I think it was a couple hours before I was going to walk down the aisle. And she just looked me in the eye and she said, Courtney, I think every bride needs to hear this. You don't need to do this. And my mom was pissed, because my mom's like, what is she trying to talk you out of getting married? Like she had this ulterior agenda. And I think she just really understood that was such a grace-filled thing to do, that this was a huge decision that was going to affect the rest of my life. And I just needed to hear that on the nth hour, right before I'm going to set foot down this aisle, it's okay to stop. It's okay to back out and change my mind. And of course I didn't. I was happy to walk down the aisle, but I just think it's such a great example that sometimes we just need to hear that it's okay to change your mind. Life is just a series of decisions.
That is so true. And there's such a calming piece when you come to terms with that, that it's okay to pivot, and it's okay to fail. And you're the same person and everyone will still love you. And that is some powerful things. And I work on that myself all the time, because it's so easy to stick to the one mode that you're really good at. But to deviate from that, you need that self-talk saying look, you don't have to do this, or look, maybe you should do this. Just having that piece in there is so important. Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier too. I think identity change makes other people really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I often ask my clients, are you okay with other people's discomfort? Because if you're not ready to change. Because people don't like it when we change who we are. We've been acting a certain way our whole life. And now all of a sudden, I'm not going to stay up until midnight. And I'm not going to cook 3 hot meals a day, or whatever it is that you feel you need to change. You can't expect everyone around you to like it. So how comfortable are you sitting with that?
Well, and I'll go farther. Your peer group changes.
Oh, for sure.
When you change.
Yes.
And that is a pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And I'm saying
And the people you used to hang out with. Yep.
Yeah.
And, I personally went through that in 2007. I was working with James Fitzgerald from OPEX Fitness.
Yeah.
He was a 2007 CrossFit Games champ, and he was a mentor of mine. And I was at a really sticky area in my life where I was hanging out with the high school, college group, but then I'm moving into like these higher level athletics and healthy eating and paleo and Rob Wolf and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I was torn, like, blah. And he just said, at some point, you're going to have to choose one way. And if there's only one person in the new group of who you want to be and where you want to go, you need to put all your time and energy into that one person and then watch that multiply.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, in the end of 2010, I built Garage Gym, rebranded to Co-Movement. And then 11 years later, now we have a big community of people that all believe in this.
Yeah. And it's such a courageous act, right? It's such a bold move. I mean, if you feel terrified when you do it, but that is, to me, I can only imagine how much it benefited your health to take a risk like that, because we all work with so many people who they know what's on their heart. They know what the next right step is, but they've been denying themselves taking it sometimes for decades. And then they wonder why their health is deteriorating.
Yes.
And it's like, this could be the thing that sets you free.
Do you find a correlation with health deterioration and lack of growth in life?
Because I always say, like, stagnation is not a good place. It's where things go to die and fester.
Correct. And so, that I find kids, right? Kids are growing, they're learning, they're fearless.
And they're in awe of everything.
And they're happy, right? They're happy. And then you get to be an adult where you stay flatlined or declining due to lack of growth. It could be health growth, spiritual, mental, relationship. And when you stop growing, I truly feel that you have a physical decay.
Yeah.
I think there is a massive correlation there. So, do you agree with that, Courtney?
Oh, I do. I had a mentor once who told me that every single decision I made was either moving on an upward trajectory, like moving me closer to the life I want to live, or it's moving you further away. There is no in between. There is not a place where you're not making any movement. Every decision is moving you closer or further. And I think when you you use that as a filter for a lot of decisions in your life, it's so simple and it's so helpful. Like, is this eating this thing? Is it going to make me healthier or unhealthier? I know it doesn't happen overnight, but there's things impacted by that one decision. And it's just it's a much easier way to look at it, but I like it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Andy, I know you have more questions there.
Well, I wanted to ask one. I was going through your website, which is a beautiful website, great design. I absolutely love it. graceandgrit.com.
Yes.
And I saw a quote, I think it was on your about page, and I'll just read it off. Your quote says, "I have a unique background as a dancer, movement teacher, personal trainer, health coach, self-development junkie, motivation speaker, and ex-perfectionist." And that last bit caught my attention. Why did you find it so important to put in the term ex-perfectionist?
Because I think I've never worked with a client where perfectionism was not a barrier ever. And I think I know I can only speak for myself, but for so much of my life, I was trying to fit in to, cultural standards of perfection, my parents' idea of perfection, and just realized how suffocating and oppressive that really was. And, I always joke with my clients, like, your job is not to lose the same 10 or 15 pounds the rest of your life. Like, the real objective of your life is to be a fully expressed and authentic human. And that means imperfect. Right? I mean, nobody is perfect, but even wasting your time aspiring to that, I think can for a lot of people, it can be really unhealthy. It certainly was for me. And I feel like so many women, I read this in The Confidence Code. It's a great book about kind of what happens in the brain around confidence. But these two authors explained that women actually have a little bit more brain matter in the prefrontal cortex, which makes us we think about things more. Like we're overthinkers. And I feel like a lot of women are overthinking perfectionism so much, like it's so in their brain that they actually fail to take a lot of action. So they're thinking rather than taking action. Now, I said earlier that I think the how you think is motivating your behavior, but you can't just sit in a thinking pattern forever. But I do think perfectionism sort of creates that in us. It kind of gets us stuck in this pattern of thinking that we never put our art out into the world. Your art is just your human beingness. I don't know if you guys know Seth Godin, right? Marketing genius.
Yeah, I follow Seth.
Yep.
Yeah, I love Seth. Years ago, I read The Great Deception. If you've never read it, I really reread that book like 15 times. But he talks a lot about putting your art out into the world, whatever your art is for you. And I think us just being human and being fully expressed is our art. And if we're so bogged down with this notion of perfectionism, we will never take risks. We will never follow our heart. We will never be self-aware because we don't like what we see. It's not perfect. So we just,
And you're never we never arrive at perfection.
Never.
So knowing that, it ends up being an excuse long-term not to take action, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And there will never, like for myself, like I'm really right now getting into like regenerative agriculture, sustainable food, farming, like that kind of stuff. And I think there's a segment of people that are like, whoa, Josh, the fitness guy is getting into farming, right?
Yeah.
But I have totally detached, and Andy knows this, from caring what people think about that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm learning and I'm researching and I'm having fun and I'm putting things out there. And I don't know, but I could spend the next 8 years of my life taking courses and reading and all of that education side, but not doing anything.
Yeah.
And
it's so true. That's that passive action. It's like action that doesn't really move you anywhere. It just kind of keeps you stagnant.
Yep.
Because you don't have to risk failure. Like listening to a podcast, I don't really have to risk failure.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Signing up for a course, I don't have to risk failure.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just signing up at the gym, whatever the case may be. But to show up and to follow through, you risk failure. And perfectionism, I have a friend who always says that perfectionism is your unwillingness to fail in front of other people.
Yep. Wow.
And that's,
100%.
That's huge. Wow.
When we put ourselves out there.
We've talked about that before in this podcast. And that's why that quote resonated with me so much is I had that same fear. I didn't want to fail in front of others. And I was definitely motivated by perfectionism. And I think it was Angela Duckworth. I read some of her work. Or I'm sorry, maybe it was Carol Dweck. Either way. But Carol Dweck did a talk on YouTube about overcoming perfectionism. And it just hit me so hard. And I realized how much I was limiting myself and not being willing to take action because I thought I had to be perfect all the time. And that just puts you in a place where you're afraid to do anything because you think you're not, it's so hard to live up to the ideal of perfection.
Totally. And, Ito really beat that into me too. Like I will never forget being in Singapore.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second because one of my questions was, I know you worked with Ito and we love Ito. And I wanted to ask you, what was your biggest takeaway from working with him? Was it something about either his training or his personality or his philosophies? So sounds like you want to dive right into that. What did you take away from him?
For sure. Yeah. So what I was going to say is like one of the things that Ito was always on me about, and I remember this distinctly in Singapore, I first met him and we were doing just like movement drills across the floor. And, he kept telling me not to point my feet. Well, I trained in classical ballet for almost 25 years of my life. So that's like telling me not to breathe. Right. But it like, as the days went by, he just kept pointing out like that I was so afraid to make things look messy or ugly or like just try on like things that don't look good. And he was 100% spot on, like got me so far out of my comfort zone. I don't know that he ever got me entirely out of it, but it was a very emotional experience for me because I felt like it didn't come across this way intentionally, but I felt like he was judging, this perfectionism that I had aspired to my whole life and really wasn't even serving me. but I didn't really even look at it until he kind of brought it up and kept bringing it up and wouldn't let me get away with it. But one of the, I don't know, the biggest lessons that I've learned from Ido, so many. I think the thing that attracted me to Ido is probably the thing that has always made me such a fan of his, which is we're all constantly evolving and growing. Mm-hmm. So what worked for you 10 years ago may not work for you now, and that would make total sense. Yep. So we can't shove ourselves into these little rigid boxes, whether that's for movement or anything else. And that there is such a gift in cross-pollinating, right? Taking elements from all these different movement modalities and just being willing to try things on to learn about yourself and to learn about your weaknesses, and to find new strengths. And, I'll never forget the YouTube. I can't even tell you what YouTube video it was, but he was being interviewed by two CrossFitters, I think. And they were talking to him about, just his movement philosophy. And I was like, I've never heard someone talk about movement in this way. He totally gets me, because I was the dancer who converted to strength training, which made no sense to anybody. But it was like, he was giving me permission to explore all these other modalities, because it's not dance that I loved, it's movement that I love. And anyway, he just opened me up to that whole realm, and I will just be forever indebted.
That's a great answer, Courtney. A very similar experience of mine. Yeah. We don't have time to dive into that. And it's the podcast. I really want to focus on these last few questions because I know we have 4 minutes.
Okay.
All right. So this is sort of and again, I think I want to have you back on. I feel like we could talk into so many other areas and go more in depth for listeners. But these questions here, it's sort of a miscellaneous section. So what are 1 to 3 books that have had a big influence on your life?
Oh, okay. So I always bring up Emotional Agility. I just think that's a book every human on the planet should read, which is a lot about how to feel the full spectrum of emotion. It's by Susan David. The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. It's so old school, but it's so good because he just talks about simple actions compounded over time, creates really massive change. And then I would say anything by Brené Brown. She just has studied vulnerability and courage and risking failure so well, and she delivers it so well. So Rising Strong, Daring Greatly, any of those I think are really good. Awesome. But I'm a huge reader. I don't know if I could really narrow it to 3, but those are 3 that come top of mind.
Sure. Do you have a favorite failure of yours?
A favorite failure. Gosh, I feel like there's been so much, I think I'm careful to even call things failures because they all feel like such learning opportunities. But I would say probably just my experience. I don't work one-on-one with Ido anymore, but did for many years. And, I failed every day. I mean, in every training session. And that was such a great opportunity for me to build resilience with failure. It doesn't have to define me. In fact, it makes me stronger. It made me a better mover. I think it just made me look at failure entirely differently, because literally how many failed handstands do you have to have before you can hold a handstand? Thousands.
Yes.
So if we aren't willing to fail, what we're really saying is, of course, we're not willing to succeed. Because
Absolutely.
you can't.
Yes. If you had a road
failure makes us
sign.
grow. We're anti-fragile.
Yes.
You can say that again.
Go ahead, Andy.
You said failure helps us grow. We're anti-fragile.
Always.
We should be.
Anti-fragile, exactly. Yes.
All right, last question, Courtney. If you had a road sign and you can put it up anywhere, what would it say and why? A road sign, what would it say?
Oh. I feel like this day and age, it would probably just be, it's okay to rest. Just pull over, take a nap.
That's great.
Enjoy the view, have a snack. Right? We just don't have, because initially I was like, oh, keep going. But then I was like, no, people need to not, it doesn't always have to be pushing harder. And of course, this goes back to, my core message, which is grace and grit. Yes, there's a time to apply grit. But grit is born from grace, right? I always say self-discipline is an extension of self-love. And sometimes to love ourselves, we need to just like stand back and like kind of get a view of the landscape and what's going on and understand ourselves a little bit better. So we know how to go forward in a way that moves us in the direction we want to go. Yeah. So I think it would just say like slow down, or it's okay to rest, something of that nature.
Oh, that's a great way to end this, Courtney. Nice, very good. How can listeners learn more about you and your coaching services? You may have inspired someone, I'm sure you have, and they want to learn more about you and what you do. How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best place, honestly, is my podcast on iTunes, Grace and Grit Podcast, just because I think people can hear me talk about my philosophies and teaching tools and all the things. Of course, the website, graceandgrit.com, has a bunch of information on it. And then just, following me on my social media accounts. But really, I think the podcast is really like the best starting place.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this has been a awesome pleasure today.
Oh, yay. For me too. So fun. I'm so glad you asked me to do this, and I always enjoy talking to you. And I'm so glad I got to meet you, Andrew.
I'm glad I got to meet you too. And I'm glad you're out there doing what you do, because it's so important. It's so important to help people with their mindset and their beliefs and get them in the right frame of mind, because that's the first step to being happier and healthier. So you're doing you're helping people with the hardest part of the journey.
It's so funny because I do have days where I convince myself, right, that like I sell the most unsexy thing on the planet, right? Which is like consistency and self-awareness. And like, I'm like the girl nobody wants to go have drinks with, right? When it comes to business. But
you're gonna make me journal.
Yeah, but this is the stuff that matters, right? Like someone's got to be talking about it. I'm not the only someone. There's lots of people talking about it. But it's the things that maybe we've been resisting the most that are probably going to change us the most.
And there needs to be more of us having these conversations to create more awareness to see change in more people.
100%. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And I will look forward to connecting with you guys again in the future.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Courtney.
Courtney,
all right,
thank you so much.
care.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. All right, bye.
Bye.